So what I'm going to do is try to take you through a pretty high-level overview of how Persona works. So what is it, how can you use it, and what's going on behind the scenes. I've set aside a lot of time at the end of the talk for Q&A because decentralized auth can get a little crazy, and what I really want to do is use that for an audience-driven discussion of online identity, Persona, whatever interests you. So without further ado, what is Persona? Persona is an open source federated login system. But I'd rather show it to you than tell you about it. So here's a demo I've recorded where I'm on the Persona homepage. You don't have to go here. That's just so I have a pretty slide. And I go to 123 done, which is a to-do list manager that we've built as kind of a demo. When I click on sign in with Persona, you'll see that I get a little pop-up, and it asks me, hey, 123 done uses Persona instead of usernames to sign you in. To sign in with Persona, please enter your email address. And so I type in my email address, and before I click next, what I want to do is I want to mention that this is a worst-case scenario. I'm using Chrome in incognito mode. I've never used Persona before. I've never visited this site before. This is first contact. So I type in my email address, just a testing address, foobar@idme. And you'll see that it says, hey, IDme makes this easy. Persona lets you use your account there to sign into sites like 123 done. So OK, yeah, I'll go sign in with IDme. Foobar@idme, it makes sense that I'll go sign in at IDme. And you'll see that I got redirected to my email provider, asked me to sign in just like normal. I click sign in, and in my recording I missed it, so I clicked it again. Comes back to Persona, address verified, does a little bit of computation, and I'm signed in. Done. Not too bad, right? But let's look at another site, hugepic.io, which lets me upload really, really big pictures and pan around them. When I click sign in with Persona, I get the same pop-up, but wait a second, there's no text field. Persona remembered who I was. My browser knows who I am. So it only takes me 2 clicks, and I'm logged in. I click the sign in button, I click continue on the pop-up, and I'm done. Notice that there are 2 huge things missing here. There's no password that I had to come up with for this site. And there's no sign-up form. I've never used this site before. And with 2 clicks, I've got an account, I'm logged in, I'm done. So moving on, let's go to the Times crossword, crossword.thetimes.co.uk. Here, when I click login, oh, hey, it's the pop-up again. And I could, again, just click the sign-in button to be done in 2 steps, but what if I wanted to use a different email address? Oh, I can just type that in. And so I'll use Dan at Delegates or Callahan at Delegates, which is just another testing domain we're using. And so I type that in. And this time, it will just work. I don't even have to sign in at that domain because in another tab somewhere, I'm already signed in, so that domain knows that that's who I am. It's like, yeah, you have a session cookie. We're fine. And there you go. I'm done. And so I'm going to do this one more time on a 4th site, Voost. Voost lets me find and register for cycling events nearby. And when I click sign in, you'll notice that they offer either Facebook or Persona. So Persona is not an all-or-nothing thing. You can use it alongside other systems. When I choose to sign in with Persona, I get the pop-up, but this time, because I have 2 addresses, I get to choose between them. So I'll choose foobar@idme, I'll click sign in, and I'm done. Except I'm not. For Voost, because they let me register for events, they need to know a little bit more about me. They need to know my gender, my age, my location. And because I've never used this before, they then show me a form that says, hey, who are you, where are you, so that we can sign you up for events. This is a great model if just getting a login, just getting an email address and identity isn't enough for your site. If you really need other information for fundamental operations, keep the initial experience the same. Keep it, you click on the Persona button, you choose your address, and you're done, and then ask the user for more information. So this is a great model to follow. Obviously not going to go through this now, so go log out. And that's persona, that's how it works. But there's one other really cool thing. You notice that I could add other email addresses. So what if I have a bunch of email addresses? Well, if I go back to 123 done and I log out, the next time I try to sign in there, I'll get that same picker with all my addresses. But it's pre-selected the last one I used on this site. So even if I have 10 or 20 email addresses, persona makes it easy. In most cases, 2 clicks, and I'm signed in. So that's persona. That's what we're building. That's what I want to show you and what I want to talk to you about today. So there are 3 huge benefits for users here. The first, there were no passwords. I never had to come up with a password for a site I was logging into. I don't have to worry about managing it. I don't have to worry about how that site will store my credentials. And it's not that Persona is hiding the passwords from me. There are no passwords at all, thanks to public key cryptography. But it's really easy. With just 2 clicks, I was able to sign into most sites. Some of them may ask me for a little bit more information, but in general, 2 clicks and I'm done. And then the third major benefit for users is that I could have typed any email address I wanted into that dialog, and it would just work. My home address, my work address, a throwaway. I'm in control. I can choose how I'm represented online. But what about the benefits for sites? Why would a website implement persona? Think about your conversion funnel. Think about the idea that every time someone lands on your site, every visitor, you want to become a user. You want them to have an account. You want them to engage with your site. You want them to work with your site. You want them to be, a repeat customer, engaged, involved. And every time you ask someone to do something, every time you ask someone to say, hey, start signing up, only a few people will start doing that. You'll lose some folks. You'll lose some folks going from starting the sign-up process to finishing the sign-up process. Some people will decide, maybe I don't want to do this. And your goal as a site owner is to minimize that drop-off. And there are 2 ways you can do it. 1, make your site as compelling as possible so that people are motivated to get over those humps that you put in front of them. Well, hey, I have to sign up, but man, if I sign up, I get this, and this, and I get to use this really cool site. The other way you can attack this, and you should do both, but the other way is to make those hurdles as easy as possible to get over so that you don't lose as many users. So that people that would have been on the cusp otherwise will still make it past that hurdle, and you'll have a chance to really capture them in your site, give them a great experience, and have another user. We can't help you make your site compelling, but we can help you make it easy. So when you think about 3 benefits for sites, it's the same thing. There are no passwords, which is a huge hurdle that's just gone for your users. And for you, that means that's more time to focus on building your site, doing the things you want to do, instead of building an authentication system. Persona is really easy. All you need to do is convince someone to click on your site twice. If you can't do that, you should probably focus on the first thing a little more. And then number 3, you can use any email address, which means that everyone that visits your site is already ready to go. They have email addresses, they can use them, and there's no lock-in. You may have noticed I was using Chrome in the demo. That's because Persona is not about Firefox. This wouldn't be worth your time, it wouldn't be worth my time if it was only a Firefox feature. Instead, Persona is being developed for the whole web in accordance with Mozilla's mission. 3 points in our manifesto state, number 4, individual security on the internet is fundamental and cannot be treated as optional. That's why Persona has world-class security. Number 5, individuals must have the ability to shape their own experience on the internet. Users are allowed to choose their own email address. They're allowed to choose how they're represented. They're allowed to choose who they trust. And number 6, the effectiveness of the internet as a public resource depends upon interoperability. That's why Persona is open source and built on open standards. Mozilla is a nonprofit. That was our mission. We're trying to advance the web. Firefox was a great way to do that back when the only browsers were Netscape or Internet Explorer. But we succeeded. Now you have all of this competition around web standards, around open standards. With Persona, we're trying to do the same thing for identity. Persona works in all major browsers, including Opera. There are some missing, though. We don't work with Google Chrome on iOS. We don't work with IE7. But as you saw with Boost, it's not an all-or-nothing proposition. You can use other alternative login methods alongside Persona. But the bottom line is, Persona is a cross-browser login solution that just works everywhere and for everyone. So that's what it is. How do you use it? I'm going to make a promise to you. In a single afternoon and with 30 lines of code, you can add Persona to your site. And real people are doing this. I had one startup after we made our beta announcement in September email me and say, hey, I noticed that we're in the same city. Would you like to come by for lunch while we implement Persona? I said, well, yeah, sure. But I ran about 15 minutes late, and when I got there, completely true story, they profusely apologized because they were already done. So Persona's awesome. It's really easy to use. The user experience is elegant. The developer experience is equally amazing. 4 steps. 1, you include a JavaScript library. 2, hook up your login buttons. 3, tell Persona what to do. 4, verify ID assertions. There's more info on the Mozilla Developer Network, but I'm going to walk you through this real quick. Before I go any further, what's an ID assertion? That's just the thing that replaces usernames and passwords. We can look into what's actually in there later if you're interested, but for now, just think of it, that's username, proof of identity, all wrapped up in nice crypto. So loading the JavaScript library. Script tag, done, 1 line. That's what lets us work everywhere. In the future, Persona is going to be built into browsers like Firefox, like our upcoming Firefox phones. But for now, by having that script tag, we'll work anywhere. Number 2, hook up your buttons. When someone clicks sign in, invoke the JavaScript function navigator.id.request. When someone clicks sign out, invoke the function navigator.id.logout. That's 5 lines, and we're halfway through the steps. What else could we do? So the third thing you have to do is you have to tell Persona what to do when someone clicks sign in or sign out. And you do that by calling this function navigator.id.watch. And you tell it 3 things. So on your page load, you invoke this function, and you tell it from bottom up, on logout, what to do. In this case, all you have to do is nuke your session cookie, like tear down the user session, just like you would with any other authentication system. And so we could implement that by saying, all right, I'm just going to post to my backend, say a page auth logout, and when that's successful, I'll reload the page. Same thing you would do if you were using traditional sessions, traditional usernames and passwords. For login, what you get is you get this argument, an assertion. The assertion is what you need to send to your backend for verification to actually make sure the user, who the user is and that they really are who they say they are. Just like when you get a username and password, you pass that to your backend to check against your database. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to post it to my backend, just like normal. The only data I pass in is I pass the assertion. This is JSON for my backend. And then on success, I reload the window because I should have a session established by then. And then the third thing is this parameter logged in user. And what you need to do is in your template, your Django templates, Jinja 2, Mako, whatever, is figure out who are you rendering this page for? Does anyone have a session right now? And if so, put their email address in there. If not, put null. So for instance, you may want to generate code that says, hey, right now, bob@example.com already has a session here, so that's who's logged in. And that's it. You're done with your front end because you had the script tag so it works everywhere, you hooked up your login buttons, and you told Persona what to do in response to login, logout, and who's there. This really isn't any different from a traditional login system, from usernames and passwords, normal sessions. The only difference is that you're doing this in JavaScript instead of with HTML forms. But what about your backend? What do you do when you get that assertion and you need to verify it? So this is code. The only libraries I'm using are Flask and requests. And so obviously the first thing I do is I check, hey, is there an assertion in that post that I got? Because if I don't have the assertion, I can't really do anything. Then I send that to Mozilla for verification. You don't have to send it to us. You can actually do this all on your own, and I'll talk about how you can do that later. But to make it easy, we let you post the assertion and then who you are to Mozilla, and we'll say, hey, that assertion matches who you are. It's fresh, it's valid, you can trust it, and we'll return some JSON to you. So here's where I make the request, and you'll see in the JSON, obviously I want to make sure that the request is OK or I abort, but if the request is OK, I get JSON back that basically says, hey, status OK. This is for me@example.com. It was intended for localhost 5000. It expires at Unix timestamp. And this identity, because it's me@example.com, was issued by example.com. So that's what I get back from Mozilla's verifier. That's what replaces, hashing the password, checking my database, and doing that comparison. All I have to do is look at that JSON object and say, hey, status is OK. The user says they're so-and-so. So I parse the JSON. If the status is OK, I pull the email address out of it, set a session cookie, and I'm done. That's the entire backend. So I'm going to give a little demo real quick. Again, using nothing but Flask and requests, I have 2 files. This is all of my Python, and this is all of my HTML. So you'll notice there's my call to id.watch. There's where I render who the current user is, hooking up my sign-in link and my sign-out link. But you don't need to read this. What I want you to get the idea of is this whole file is 48 lines of code. My entire front-end HTML, JavaScript, 48 lines. My entire backend, this example.py file, 40 lines of code. That whole thing, less than 90 lines. And what you get, you're currently logged in as nobody. You can sign in. So I click sign in. The pop-up loads. Persona asks me, it notices that, hey, this is the second time I've used this on this computer. Do I trust this computer, or am I at a public terminal? I trust this computer. Does the backend work? And the internet fails me. Oh no. I know what I did. Oh well, live coding, you get the idea. This actually does work, right? You can't see it. It's beautiful. Just close that now. But the truth of the matter is, I misnamed a variable. In 90 lines, that's a complete demo with world-class authentication. But you don't even have to write those 90 lines or those 30 lines. If you're using Django, you can use the Django browser ID library. That's a package that we're using quite a bit internally at Mozilla. It's being maintained by Mike Kelly, who's a Mozilla employee, and it makes integration just a breeze. Or you could use Pyramid and use the Pyramid Persona library. The author of that wrote a really great blog post about how we integrated this, how you can use it, how it works. Obviously, if you're using a lighter weight framework, Flask, Bottle, whatever else, it's really easy to roll your own. But you really shouldn't worry about taking notes on this. Bottom line, go to the quick setup guide. It's at developer.mozilla.org/persona. So that's cool. It's really easy for users. It's really easy for developers. But how does it work behind the scenes? Well, before we get to that, why did I ask for an email address? Why does Persona ask people to type in an email address for authentication? It turns out that the format of an email address has a few really, really nice properties. The first of which is that it embeds the authority right in the address. And what I mean when I say that is that if I'm trying to use dancallahan@gmail.com, well, my identity better be certified by gmail.com. If I'm using my own domain, I can certify myself. So just that format, who at where, is what allows us. That's the key to making Persona decentralized. That's the key to this being a federated system. That's the key to putting you in control of who you trust. Because you could decide to run your own identity provider, and only trust yourself. But it has other benefits for users. Email addresses really embody this idea of a faceted identity, the idea that me at work is different from me at home or me at school. And that those should be different. They should be separate. And I should be able to choose who I am online. Email addresses are also something that you already have. So everyone's already bootstrapped. They can start today. And it's something that they know that they have. And this last point's subtle, but really, really important. Because millions of users have Gmail addresses, Gmail accounts. They know they have a Gmail account. Very, very few of those know that that also means that they have a Google OpenID. So email addresses are great because they let us be federated, and they're good for the user. Here's a protocol diagram. I'm going to ask two people to come up on stage to kind of help me pantomime the protocol so you can get a feel for how this thing works. And it's public key crypto, but it's surprisingly easy. If just one of you could stand on one side and one on the other. So you'll notice, before I get started, on this diagram, there are two sides. On the left are what we call relying parties, or RPs. Those are sites that you can log into with Persona. On the right are what we call identity providers. Those are domains that can vouch for their own users and say, yes, here's a Persona credential. This user really is who they say they are. And so what was happening when I was doing that demo is you saw me type in my email address, it sent me to my email provider, and I could log in. But what really happens is the first thing I, as the browser, decide to do is I say, well, hey, I want to log in somewhere with my Gmail address. And so I walk over to Gmail, and I say, hey, Gmail, I'm going to write down what my email address is, and I'm going to generate and write down a public key. And if you agree that that's my email address, I want you to sign this paper. And Gmail will sign that if I can prove to Gmail that I really am who I say I am. That's why I had to log in when I used that ID.me account. ID.me was like, well, yeah, sure, but you got to log in first, buddy. So I do that, and now I have everything I need, because I store this in my browser, to prove who I am to sites. And so when I decide that I want to log in with x.com, or to x.com, what I do, when I want to log into SendGrid, if SendGrid supports Persona, I think Ian just committed to supporting Persona on SendGrid. I'll be at the sprints, you'll be at the sprints, we'll make something happen. When I decide to log into SendGrid, I take that document that Gmail signed for me, and I add two pieces of information to it. I add where I'm going, SendGrid, because they support Persona, or will soon. And I write down what time it is, so you know that this is a fresh request. It's not a replay. It's not meant for someone else. And then I sign that with my key. And so I take this, and I hand it to SendGrid. And what SendGrid can do is they can use that information to make sure, yes, I did intend to log into them. Yes, this is a current request. Yes, I'm the same person that thing that Gmail signed was issued to. But there's one key piece missing. How does SendGrid know that this really did come from Gmail, that it's authentic? And so all he needs to do is say, hey, Gmail, what's your public key? So Gmail will tell SendGrid his public key, and if it matches, SendGrid knows who I am, and I can log in. But the really nice thing about that is that all that's asked of Gmail is their public key. It doesn't reveal who I am. It doesn't reveal how many people are logging in because it can be cached. So it's really great for my privacy in addition to being really easy to use. Thank you. You guys can sit down. Did that? So show of hands. Should I do more protocol pantomimes in future talks? Is that, yeah? The OpenID one is nuts. It's like, it's a whirlwind. So I lied to you all along. If you do this right now, if any of you have laptops and you're like, wait a second, Dan, I tried to use Gmail and I didn't see that experience. I saw something different. Well, that's the trick to decentralized protocols, right? Bootstrapping. It's a chicken and egg problem, because how do we convince Gmail and every other email provider to support Persona before sites let you log in with it? And how do we convince sites to let you log in with it before every single email provider supports it? Well, that's not good. But I promised you that any email address would work, and so how do I do that? And it turns out that what we've done at Mozilla is we built an optional, completely temporary, centralized service at persona.org. So the first step is the same. I go to Gmail, I'm like, hey Gmail, I'm Dan Callahan at gmail.com, right? Totally gonna sign this, right? And Gmail's gonna be like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. But I'm not out of luck. Because if I trust Mozilla, I can go back to persona.org and say, hey, Mozilla, could you vouch for me on Gmail's behalf? Because they can't do it themselves. And we'll say, sure, if you can prove to us that you really have that account. And we can do that in a number of ways. But just simply, we could send you a confirmation email. And if you can click on a link in that, clearly you can read that inbox. Clearly you have authority to access that account. So if you can do that, then we'll vouch for you. We'll sign that little slip that says who you are and what your public key is. And then when you go and present it to x.com, or SendGrid, as it will soon be, fingers crossed. See, it's so nice and volunteering, and now public commitments. So x.com will see that, and it'll check it, and it'll say, well, everything looks right, but this is a Gmail address, and it says it was certified by login.persona.org. Well, I know that that's the Mozilla fallback, because by convention, I'm okay trusting that, and I trust Mozilla because it's all open source. I can audit this. I know what practice they're doing. They've been having external security audits. But I'm not going to trust it until I know for myself that Gmail couldn't have issued this. Because if Gmail could have issued my identity, then why the heck isn't it from Gmail? And so that's that, the second dotted red line, number 4. X.com will go over and say, hey, Gmail, what's your public key? And Gmail will say, I don't have one. And at that point, X.com will know that it's okay that this came from the fallback. And if X.com chooses to trust the fallback, it's always your choice as a site owner, then the user can log in. So that's how we have a centralized fallback to help bootstrap a decentralized system. The really nice thing about this is as soon as Gmail or any other domain stands up and says, hey, I can vouch for my own users, it's really simple. You publish like one JSON file, and we know that that's cool. We're out of the picture. And we're left with a completely freestanding, decentralized network. So this lets us bootstrap, this lets us fulfill that promise to work everywhere, but that's the future. Bottom line, the way Persona works is that it lets you say, I'm me at example.com, and here's the proof. So in summary, Persona, it's a cross-browser login system. It works everywhere for everyone. It works by letting you say, I'm me at example.com. Here is the proof. And if you want to get started, single afternoon, follow the quick setup guide, developer.mozilla.org/persona. Before I go to questions, I have a request. It's literally my birthday tomorrow. I flew all the way to Toronto from Minneapolis to discover your Tim Hortons, your Timbits, your milk in bags, this wondrous land of opportunity. And one of those opportunities is that you're all really nice. You all showed up to show me that you care. You came to my talk, but I think you could do better because you're maybe at a 3 out of 10. Oh. But what would get you to 10 out of 10 if you spend one afternoon with Persona this week. If you're a developer, add it to your site. I'm completely serious. We've had real people do it in 15 minutes. I don't want to promise that because that's crazy, but one afternoon is absolutely what we're seeing in the wild. If you don't have a site, welcome to PyCon Canada. The site is open source. It uses traditional logins. Help them stop. If you play with Persona, if you use it, tell me about your experience. The only way we can build this, the only way we can do the right thing for the future of the web is if people, users, developers, everyone that sees this, provides feedback and lets me know, what feels right about this, what doesn't feel right, what are we doing that we could do better. And then if you want to take it to 11, this one goes to 11. Email one site that you use regularly and ask them to use Persona. If this looks good, if we seem like we're on the right track, the only way we can get there is with word of mouth. It's with people going out and saying, hey, I saw this, I like it, I want to use it. please let me. Questions? Before the question, real quick, I will note, oh man, there are already people lining up. I don't even have to like entice you. I have Persona stickers if you ask a question or if you track me down afterwards. Yeah, I'll put them here. Please only take one. But yeah.
So SendGrid doesn't use Persona, but happy early birthday. I got a Tim Hortons gift card for you.
Thank you.
I'm curious, what's the backend built in? Like, is it built in Python? Like, what do you guys build Persona in?
You had to ask that one.
Well, hey, right?
So it's a Node.js project. I'm so sorry. Thank you. I would take a second to explain that. It actually makes sense. We had to do all this crypto stuff in the browser, and we had to be able to stub it out. And so this is a case where we write that once, and we can actually use that same code, client-side and server-side. And it felt like a really natural fit. So we're pretty much a big Node shop. We use Selenium for testing, so we use the Python driver there. But otherwise, we integrate with a lot of Python sites. Mozilla is a big Python shop, but Persona itself, JavaScript all the way down.
So correct me if I'm wrong. It seems a lot of this hinges on your email provider being able to basically say you are who you say you are. So if I'm using something, let's say like Hotmail, and they don't have two-factor authentication, and my email is compromised, does that make Persona less secure? And is there any way or future plan to add something like two-factor auth to Persona itself so you don't rely on the email having good security?
So a big part of this is recognizing the status quo is already that your email provider has an enormous amount of control over your accounts. Because if someone compromises your account, they can go and reset your password on almost any other site and gain access that way. So we're not trying to address that right now. What we're seeing and what I think is actually rather nice is that people ask that question. So even though this is the current world is one in which you have to trust your email provider, it's one that kind of, it's the whole put the lobster in the pot or the frog in the pot and turn up the heat slowly, right? It slowly became the case that everything hinged on your email provider. And with Persona, people are actually having to step back and say, wait, do I trust this? Which I think is good for the web. But ultimately, since it's a decentralized architecture, authentication is solely in the hands of that email provider.
Thanks.
Thank you.
My concern is that for regular users who will probably take forever to know what Persona even is that it's a jarring experience the first time to get an unfamiliar pop-up, get an email from an unfamiliar place, to sign in. I'm worried that implementing something like this to sign in would actually reduce conversions for the people who don't yet have a Persona account. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So we got feedback from Boost. They were one of the early adopters of Persona. And when we announced our beta, they've been using Persona for about, I think, 3 or 4 months at that point, maybe a little longer. And they commented on Hacker News and they said, we definitely got pushback on Facebook auth. You can't run a Facebook-only login system without alienating a significant chunk of most audiences. Now that Persona and Facebook are on equal footing, we have yet to have anyone complain about the sign-up process. And that last bit is actually kind of key. Because Boost, they're targeting cyclists. They're not targeting a technical audience. They have good demographics because they need to know your age so they can register you for appropriate events. And they're generally hitting older, less technical people. And they've yet to have anyone complain. So they're having great success. So we've seen in the real world pretty good success with it. The other nice thing is that whole fallback process, when we say, hey, Mozilla, will you vouch for me? And we send you an email and you have to click on that link, that can be a little rough. When they click on the link, it will automatically redirect them back to your site and you'll be logged in there. So we try to close that loop. But what we're doing is we're working right now on something that should launch late December, early January, that says, well, all we really care about is proof that you are that address. We don't care that you click on a link. And all the major email providers, or the 3 major email providers, Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo, have OpenID or OAuth endpoints. And so when you use a Gmail address with Persona, which like 70% of users on most English-speaking site databases will be on one of those domains, you type in your email address, you click next, you see a Google OpenID prompt that just says allow, don't allow. You click allow, and you're done. 3 clicks, you never leave the browser. So we're seeing real-world good results right now, and it's only going to get better with no changes on your part.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
So can you say a bit more about how logging out worked? And I mean, I don't really want anyone who has my browser to be able to get into all my accounts. I don't normally stay logged into things I'm not using. And it wasn't clear to me if that's separate. You know, like, do I have to close my browser every time? Do I have to start partitioning my accounts based on the email? Because there's some things I stay logged into that I don't care that much, and there's other things I only log in when I need them. So if you could talk a bit about that.
So we're kind of following like a device-centric security model, where the idea is that if you go and get provisioned, if you have a little slip of paper signed by your email provider, then that device can log in as you. But these things have a relatively short time to live. By default, you only get one that's good for an hour. So you can proactively log out and invalidate it. But if you walk away from a terminal, an hour later, someone would have to re-authenticate to your email provider to get re-provisioned. That was that one pop-up when I did my beautiful demo that worked and no one will tweet otherwise. It asked me, is this your computer or not? Do you want to be able to stay signing in for a month or for an hour? And so we're trying to address that by basically pushing the trust model to the device you're on, but still giving you the ability to proactively log out.
Okay, but like maybe I'm just missing something, but you don't every time have to put in your password to log into that email, right?
Right.
So
as long as the certificate that I have signed by my email provider is valid, and it's usually only valid for an hour, then I can sign into other sites without having to go back to my email provider.
yeah.
But if you go to like persona.org and you click log out or you click this isn't me in the pop-up, then it just destroys that certificate, and then the next time you try to do it, you'll have to use your password.
Okay.
So it can either expire based on time or it can expire based on your action.
And sorry, I'm still not quite done. And so so then I do, in a sense, want to partition my logins based on how I use them. Like, I don't want to use one email for a bunch of things because I don't really want to give people, even if it is only an hour, like someone grabs my computer out of my hand. You know what I mean? It doesn't happen often, but I just don't really like having things open like that.
Right, yeah. I mean, we could talk a little bit more about that after the rest of the Q&A, but there are ways that we can address that, both with native browser integration, with allowing you to kind of proactively choose how long the certificate's good for.
Yeah, in OpenID, there's all sorts of hashing and signature of the packets, and I noticed that requests and the JavaScript side, you just pass plain JSON. Weren't those things made for you? Were that useful on OpenID? Why aren't they here?
So the big thing with OpenID is that the model is one in which every time I log in, I go through my identity provider and back to the site, and it's a handoff, a direct handoff saying, I'm going to Gmail, Gmail's going to pass me to Stack Overflow, Stack Overflow is going to ask Gmail if it was okay. And so that's why you need all of that there. For us, we're basically using public key crypto to say, this is a legitimate document. And it hinges on having SSL available so that you can fetch the public key and verify the signature on stuff. But since we can do that, we can do all this authentication in very separate, almost stateless transactions.
It seems to me that the people who currently control ID kind of have a vested interest in maintaining that control, and laymen are like my mom or whatever are completely satisfied with that arrangement. Is Mozilla doing anything other than trying to convince us to add add a persona to our sites to kind of sway those people who are controlling ID, like Facebook and Gmail?
Well, so the nice thing is, when you're at the scale of Facebook, Gmail, whatever, you have hundreds of millions of users, you have a login button everywhere. What Persona does by being decentralized is with one button that will work for anyone, it allows smaller communities that may have 50 million users to stand up and be on equal footing by implementing this protocol, which is nice. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to empower the user to make an informed choice. And so if they want to keep using Gmail, fine, it'll work great with Gmail. If they want to use another email address, if they want to take control of their identity, it'll work there too. MailChimp wrote an interesting blog post. They're not quite targeting lay people or normal users, where they said just 3.4% of the people that visited our login page actually used Facebook or Twitter to log in. And so at least in one case, social auth isn't quite something that covers everyone, because you have to make sure you have the right mix of login options so that I have an account with one of them and I'm willing to use it for login. And in user testing, we do see a lot of drop-off at the Facebook Connect point. When you see that site and you're like, oh, do I want to allow or deny? A lot of people stop and they're like, actually, I don't want to connect this to my Facebook. And with Persona, because you don't have to worry about your wall, you don't have to worry about your timeline, it's just authentication right now, we don't see that same drop-off.
Is that a distinction that you think users will understand if they're inputting an email address? Do you think that they see it as something that's completely separate from the email provider, or?
So in testing, it's working pretty well for regular users, but we're also trying to find ways, we're experimenting with pushing the login higher up in the stack so that you log into your browser once, and then we'll use that to, we'll have actual user benefits to that. So that'll be like the next generation of Firefox Sync. You sign into Firefox with Persona, and then any site that has a Persona login, with one click, you can just be signed in. And hopefully at that point, by moving it up into the Chrome and providing real tangible user benefits to it, people will just use it, and it'll just happen.
Sorry, one quick more thing about that. When that happens, what is the result for the people who currently implemented using the JavaScript?
You won't have to change a thing. So the reason we're using a JavaScript API, the reason we're hanging functions off of navigator.id, is so that the browser can implement those natively.
Okay.
And that shim basically says, hey, browser, do you know how to do request, logout, and watch? And if the browser says yes, then the shim doesn't do anything. It's a no-op. And the native implementation takes over. That'll actually be shipping live in production on our Firefox phones. The Firefox Marketplace will use Persona for authentication there, which will be really cool.
Yeah, I just took one of my questions right there. But one of the other questions I had was, this is something that's probably great for smaller sites, at least at first, because you're removing the speed bumps because you want to get users. But once the sites are larger and they possibly have issues with like spam and stuff like that, where would they be sticking like a CAPTCHA or something like this in here? Because you can't necessarily push that to the email provider because these the spam bots will register a whole bunch of domains and then authenticate themselves.
Mm-hmm. Right. So one thing you could do is you could use Persona to basically delay the CAPTCHA until a user interaction that might be spammy. So sure, let people log in with Persona, but before you post your first comment, then your site could show the CAPTCHA. So it's something like that. So it'd smooth over that bump for first-time users. Also, because all this is based on public key crypto, and you have to have a valid domain, valid SSL cert, whatever else, you could also implement blocking based on public keys. So it's like, hey, I'm not going to trust things that are signed with this key or this key or this key, or have some sort of blacklist like that.
That gets in the same thing. They have the same thing with email, but they don't really work that well because they just keep registering domains. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so it's not a huge difference from the status quo, but yeah, like right now, you have to implement your own CAPTCHA if you want to make sure that real humans are doing it. With Persona, you'd have to implement your own CAPTCHA after the login process.
So in your demo there, you still had to pop up a thing to sign in and put your password and so on. And that seems to be the big flaw with OpenID as well, is that you get out of your control, bumped somewhere else, and for lay people, it's really easy to be confused about where you are because they don't know about how to check certificates properly, that the domain matches what they expect, and so all you have to do is have the right style and maybe a certificate that matches your domain that's not actually the right domain. So, and how do you deal, is there any way that you're dealing with that now, or is there going to be something that you're going to do to deal with that in the future?
Right now, what you see is what you get. One thing that we're going to try to do, like I said, is by, in our fallback, punting people over to like the Google OpenID endpoint instead of sending them an email or whatever else. There actually won't be a point at which they enter their password. If you can presume that in another tab, at some point, the user had signed into their Gmail, which is...
But if you're not already signed into your Gmail,
then you will
have to
see a
enter
login.
Password. And we know I'm logged into my Gmail, therefore I shouldn't see a password prompt. But my mom, she's the usual thing here, my mom, she gets jumped over to Gmail. She doesn't know whether she's logged into Gmail or not. She, it's mysterious how she gets a password prompt or not.
Right, so we're not doing a lot of work to solve that right now. Once we start moving the whole sign-in process higher up into the browser, into the Chrome, we should be able to hopefully show users that you should never type in a password on a page, if we can get to that point. But right now, it's not terribly different from the status quo from that standpoint.
that's the last question. So.
Cool. Well, hey, thank you all so very much.